Ladies and gentlemen, so you have prayed, you have wept, you have asked with all the longing of your heart, and now there is silence. But the question is not whether God heard your prayer. The question is, can you hear the stillness where the answer begins to form? We are so used to noise, mental noise, emotional noise, that we think silence means nothing is happening. But it is in the silence that grace begins its slow, sacred work. Just because the universe is not shouting doesn't mean it is not moving. A tree does not grow by noise. A river does not flow by noise. And your soul will not heal by noise. It happens in stillness. There is a part of existence that does not follow your calendar, your impatience or your expectations. It moves by a deeper intelligence, something far more ancient than thought. When you pray, you're not placing an order, you're aligning yourself with a force that knows what you truly need, not just what your emotions cry for in the moment. Trust. This is the forgotten art. People think trust means believing things will go your way. Ah, no, no. Trust means you let go of your way long enough to see the way that is greater than you. You don't trust because everything is clear. You trust because clarity comes after surrender, not before it. You may ask, why is nothing changing? Why is the pain still here? But maybe it is not about removal. Maybe it is about revelation. Maybe God is not taking away the storm. Maybe He is teaching you to walk through it without fear, without doubt, without losing your light. The prayer was heard, it was never ignored. But you must now move from asking to receiving. And receiving requires stillness, not just in the body, but in the mind, in the breath, in the being. Can you be still, not dead, not passive, but utterly alive in your stillness? Because in stillness, there is wisdom. In trust, there is transformation. And when you stop forcing the door to open, you might realize it was never locked. So wait, not with desperation, but with devotion. Be still, not with fear but with faith. You are not being denied, you are being prepared. Trust, not because you have proof, but because you have presence. Silence is not the absence of response, it is the language of the divine. It is the sacred space between the question and the answer, the breath between the ache and the healing. The unseen movement beneath all still waters where the divine speaks not through thunder, but through the quiet echo of your own soul. And when the world outside grows loud and unbearable, it is often because the voice within is being ignored, not because the divine is absent, but because you are not tuned into the frequency where God no longer explains, He only is. And that being is wrapped in a silence that is alive, not empty. The human mind craves noise, craves words, craves signs and symbols, but what you do not realize is that the deepest truths do not scream. They simply are, and they dwell in that sacred quietude which feels like nothing to the anxious heart but is in fact everything to the awakened one. Because when the noise stops and your thoughts run out of excuses, you start to feel something deeper rising within. Not an answer in language, but a knowing that doesn't require proof, and that knowing, raw, wordless, timeless, is the divine embracing you without a sound. You think silence means you've been forgotten, that heaven has closed its doors and left you alone with your wounds. Truth is, you are being drawn into a realm beyond human understanding where prayer is not answered in phrases, but in presence. Where God does not shout back, but draws near like a wind brushing across your spirit, unmeasured, unannounced, yet unmistakably felt. And when you finally stop straining to hear, you begin to sense that what you've been calling delay was actually depth being built inside you. This silence, it isn't cold or distant, it is sacred precision like the soil resting before spring, like the ocean before the tide shifts, like the night sky before the first morning light. And if you could only stop fighting it, if you could stop filling it with your panic, your overthinking, your resistance, you might begin to see that the silence is not withholding anything. It is delivering something, slowly, richly, deeply, something your noise would have drowned had it come too fast. Silence is the divine's invitation to sit with yourself without flinching, to sit with your questions without rushing, to sit with your pain without demanding it go away instantly. And in that space where nothing seems to be happening, the deepest healing begins, not in the removal of your ache, but in the recognition that you are still whole, still loved, still held, even when your outer world remains unchanged. Because sometimes the most profound transformation does not begin with an answer, but with the courage to sit in sacred stillness. We are taught to fear silence, to fill it, to flee it. But what if the silence was never empty? What if it was pregnant with meaning, saturated with unseen shifts? What if it was God's most honest reply? A reply that doesn't manipulate your mind but awakens your spirit, not with explanation but with presence. And maybe the reason silence is hard to bear is because it requires us to surrender our need to know and begin trusting that we are already known completely. In silence, ego dies because it cannot dominate what it cannot define. And the soul begins to rise because it finally has room to breathe. And in that breath, there is no need to be impressive or correct or even certain. There is only the raw, unfiltered communion between your essence and the source of all things. And what flows from that space may not be an immediate solution, but it will be a sacred shift, a return, a realignment that reorients your being not toward answers, but toward awareness. So when silence comes after your prayer, do not think you have been ignored, realize you are being invited. Not to talk louder, but to listen deeper, not to ask again, but to become the answer in time. And know that what you call silence is actually the sound of the divine waiting for you to fall beneath your fear and rest in the stillness where miracles begin. Not with a sound, but with a surrender that never ends. Trust doesn't begin when the answer comes. It begins when nothing makes sense, when the path is fog. When your prayers seem to vanish into the void, no sign comes to soothe your restless heart. And in that sacred uncertainty, where logic breaks down and emotions run dry, something deeper is invited to awaken. Not the trust that is based on evidence, but the trust that survives the absence of it. The kind that anchors you not because of clarity but despite the lack of it. Not because you know what is next, but because you choose to believe there is still a next worth moving toward. You see, anyone can trust when the stars align, when the doors open easily, when the blessings flow like a river and life makes perfect sense, but that's not real trust. That's agreement with comfort, that's convenience disguised as faith. And the real depth of trust only reveals itself when your logic rebels, when your feelings collapse under the weight of delay, when your questions multiply but answers stay hidden. And in that holy confusion, the soul is stretched into surrender. A surrender not born from defeat but from devotion. There is a space between the asking and the arriving, a space where nothing feels secure, where timelines fall apart and expectations rot in your hands. And it is there, in that in-between, you are asked to remain open, not because it's easy, but because there is something sacred, not knowing and still moving, in being uncertain and still standing, in being lost and still trusting that some unseen force is guiding what your eyes cannot yet confirm. When everything makes sense, the mind is content. But when nothing makes sense, the soul is being tested, refined, expanded beyond its old boundaries. And if you are brave enough to sit in that place without rushing to escape, without reaching for shallow answers or false comforts, then what grows in you is not just patience but wisdom. Not just endurance but faith that has passed through fire and come out quieter, steadier, more… Trust, you must understand, is not a feeling. It is a decision, a posture, a silent yes whispered through clenched fists and tired eyes, a willingness to keep breathing even when the future is blurred, a refusal to collapse into despair simply because the outcome hasn't arrived. Because sometimes trust is not about feeling peace, but choosing presence, not about being sure, but about staying still when everything in you wants to run. And yes, there will be days when your trust feels foolish, when hope feels heavy, when you are tempted to call the silence rejection and the delay abandonment. But if you can just hold on just a little longer, you will begin to sense a shift. Unnecessarily, not necessarily in your spirit. Ako, in your way of being, in the depth of your surrender that no longer depends on results to feel rooted. You have moved from trusting for something to trusting through something. It is in the ache, in the questions, in the confusion that you begin to build a different kind of strength that controls or predicts, but a strength that allows, that receives, that endures without resentment. Because this trust is not built on what you see, but on who you are becoming when you stop needing to see and start learning to be. And in that being, in that moment by moment trust, something sacred begins to unfold, not all at once, slowly, gently, faithfully. Don't wait for things to make sense before you trust, because that's not trust. That's transaction, that's negotiation with the divine, and the real trust begins when you have every reason to give up, but you reason to give it when you're surrounded by darkness, but you choose to keep walking. When you're tired of waiting, but you choose to keep believing, not because you see the answer coming, but because something inside you knows, even now, even now, you are not walking alone, and that knowing is enough to keep going endlessly. Huh? What is unfolding may be unseen, but it is not unheard because just because your eyes do not perceive, it does not mean the heavens are not responding. Just because your senses fail to catch the shift, doesn't mean the shift is not taking place. For the sacred rarely makes noise as it moves, it works in silence, beneath the surface, beyond your awareness, and often while you are busy questioning, doubting, or even despairing. Something ancient and intentional is already working on your behalf in a realm beyond visibility. A seed sprout long before the first leaf breaks the soil, and you must remember that absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. You are so conditioned to measure progress by what you can see, to define success by what has manifested, to trust only what is tangible and immediate. And yet the deepest truths, the most meaningful changes, the most divine orchestrations, they happen in invisible layers first. In the hidden realms where time doesn't operate the way your watch does, and just because you cannot map it, doesn't mean it's not in motion. Just because there's no headline or highlight, doesn't mean your story isn't unfolding exactly as it should, with perfect precision. Beneath the radar of your awareness, but never beyond the reach of divine hearing. Your cries have not gone unnoticed, your prayers have not hit a ceiling, your intentions have not been wasted in the dark. They were heard in the very moment they were birthed, caught like sacred breath in the divine current even now. They are echoing through the unseen corridors of grace, where alignment is forming, pathways are clearing, and answers are being shaped not just for your want, but for your highest becoming. And though you may not see the movement, you are living inside its ripple. Every single moment you choose to trust rather than retreat. The divine does not forget what was spoken in sincerity, does not overlook the whispered plea, does not abandon the one who knocks even when the door stays closed a little longer. And what you call silence is not neglect, it is protection, it is preparation, it is divine timing re-ending the world in ways you could not yet hold, could not yet carry. Because what's coming is not small, not shallow, not rushed. It is sacred and sacred things take time to root before they rise, and they must rise in alignment, not in anxiety. Even the darkness you're walking through now, it is not wasted, not meaningless, not random. It is part of what is being heard, part of what is being woven, because the weight you feel, the ache you carry, the uncertainty you sit with are all being used as ingredients in the greater unfolding. The kind of unfolding that does not cater to your comfort but to your calling. And you may not see the full shape of it yet, but every step, every delay, every detour is part of the masterpiece still being drawn. You may feel alone, forgotten, stalled, but you are not, because what is meant for you is not waiting to hear your perfection, it is responding to your persistence, not waiting for you to earn it, but asking you to trust enough to receive it when it comes. And while you wait, while you wonder, while you wander through the fog of not knowing, the divine is still listening, still shaping, still drawing the invisible lines between what was and what will be, quietly, faithfully, unshakable. So do not mistake invisibility for inactivity. Do not mistake delay for denial. Do not confuse mystery with abandonment. Because even the silence is full of answers you can't yet understand. Even the pause is filled with prayers being turned into provision. And even the empty spaces are echoing with the sound of what's on its way. And you are not being ignored, you are being intricately prepared for something that doesn't just arrive when you expect. But when you are finally ready, carry it without losing yourself. And so you must breathe not just to pass time, but to anchor deeper into trust, into stillness, into the knowing that what you cannot see is still being heard, that the thread is still weaving, the tide still turning, the answer still forming. And your only task in this sacred waiting is not to control, not to predict, not to demand, but to remain, to stay soft, to stay open, to stay grounded in faith. Because what is unfolding may be unseen, but it is not unheard. And what is heard in heaven always finds its way to earth, never too early, never too late, only in divine, perfect, endless time. Restlessness delays what stillness invites, because in your anxious striving, in your desperate reaching, in your constant need to fix, force or figure it all out, You actually push away the very clarity, the very peace, the very unfolding that can only arrive in stillness. Bye. And the more you chase answers, the more you scatter your own energy, like a pond disturbed by stones. Its surface ripples and nothing beneath can be seen. And in that chaos, the guidance that was meant for you becomes drowned out by the noise you create from within. Stillness is not inactivity, it is receptivity, it is presence without panic, it is awareness without attachment. And when you are still not physically alone or motionless, but internally quiet, you begin to hear the softest signals, the most sacred whispers that do not come through pressure or performance, but only through presence. And in that presence, life begins to flow, not according to your schedule, but according to rhythm, harmony, timing that is far more intelligent than your impatience. You have been taught to equate movement with progress, action with success, hustle with purpose. Not all motion is forward, not all action is aligned, and many times your restlessness takes you in circles, exhausting you without enlightening. Because when you operate from urgency, you forget who you are, you move out of fear rather than wisdom. And the doors that would have opened with ease now resist you, not out of punishment, but because what is sacred will not be revealed through force. Stillness, on the other hand, is magnetic. It draws clarity, healing, timing and truth to you like gravity. It doesn't chase but attracts. It doesn't demand but receives. And in that surrender there is power, power that cannot be earned by effort alone, because it comes not from what you do, but from the space you create for the divine to do through you. And in that space, everything shifts, not always outside first, but always inside first, where all true transformation begins. But restlessness is seductive. It tells you that if you don't act now, it will all fall apart, that if you stop pushing, you'll be forgotten, that if you pause, you'll miss your chance. And so you keep moving not from trust, but from fear, not from alignment, but from panic. And in doing so, you delay not the answer, but your ability to receive it, because stillness was a condition under which it could have entered your life, but you were too busy making noise to notice when it arrived. This is why stillness is not weakness. It is wisdom, and it is why the most powerful changes in your life often come not when you are striving for them, but when you are surrendered to them. When you are surrendered to them, when you finally stop trying to control the outcome and instead created space for grace. And in that space, what belongs to you can find you without resistance, because you are no longer holding on so tightly to what isn't working. And now your hands and heart and yes, it will feel unfamiliar, uncomfortable even, to slow down when everything in you is screaming to rush ahead. But you must remember, urgency is not always truth, and peace does not arrive as a reward after you achieve, it often arrives as a guide before you even begin. And if you follow that peace, even when it feels like you're doing nothing, you will discover that what comes through stillness is not less. It is more real, more lasting, more aligned with your soul than anything restlessness ever offered. So sit, breathe, return, not just to your body, but to your being, to the quiet knowing beneath the noise, to the timeless awareness that doesn't panic about what's next, because it already is. And the more still you become, the more clearly you will see that what you were chasing was never far. It was waiting for you to slow down enough to feel it, to receive it, to become what only stillness could have made you ready for. And in that readiness, you will find not just answers, but a way of living that never ends. Your prayer was not lost. It became part of a divine rhythm beyond your timing, because the moment your soul cried out, the moment your heart trembled with sincerity, the heavens received it, not as a task to be answered, but as a note in a much greater symphony, one that plays not to the rhythm of urgency, but to the harmony of alignment. And while your mind races ahead, counting seconds and tracking signs, the divine is moving on a scale so vast, so layered, so intricate, that your single prayer is not ignored, it is absorbed, held, woven into a tapestry that you are still too close to see. You believe that if there is no immediate result, there must be no response. But your prayer was not a transaction, it was a seed. And seeds do not bloom on demand, they bloom in season. And season is not determined by your emotion or your need. It is determined by readiness, by growth, by timing that transcends explanation. And just because it feels like nothing is changing, doesn't mean the roots aren't spreading deep beneath the surface where your eyes cannot follow, but your trust must. You have to understand that when you release a prayer, you are not throwing it into silence. You are joining a movement, entering a sacred process, and like every echo that travels through a canyon, it returns. Not always in the shape you expect, not always in the… but always in the form that best fits your becoming. And the longer the return takes, the deeper the response tends to be, for the divine is not interested in rushing what is meant to reshape you from the inside out. The rhythm of the divine is not rushed, not linear, not mechanical, it is alive, intelligent, flowing in perfect cadence with every soul's unfolding. And when your prayer enters that rhythm, it is not lost, not paused, but placed precisely, lovingly, so that it can arrive at the intersection of need and readiness, at the point where what you long for will no longer overwhelm you, but will match the strength you gained while waiting in faith. And in that moment, it will not be a blessing that happens to you, it will be a becoming that unfolds through. And yes, it is hard to wait, to wonder, to feel like the sky is silent while your heart is loud with longing. But if you can rest in the knowing that your prayer has not vanished, that it has not been discarded, that it is circling back through layers of divine orchestration, then you will begin to shift, not into resignation but into reverence. The kind of reverence that knows a sacred delay is never a denial but a design. And in that design, you are not just being prepared to receive, you are being shaped to sustain. Every tear, every sleepless night, every whispered why is not going unnoticed. They are being gathered, honored, absorbed into that same rhythm that doesn't forget, that doesn't misplace, that doesn't operate on human timelines. And while you think you are being asked to wait, what's really happening is you are being aligned, your heart, your path, your purpose all being synchronized so that when what is meant for you arrives, it does not just touch your life, it transforms it. So don't give up just because it hasn't happened yet. Don't let impatience poison your perception. Don't let silence convince you of absence, because your prayer did not disappear. It entered the current of something higher, something wiser, something vast enough to hold not just your request, but the future it belongs to. And though your eyes may still search for signs, let your spirit rest in the deeper truth that what is yours, not being kept from you, it is being kept for you. And in that trust, you will find a new rhythm, not the rhythm of pressure, not the rhythm of fear, but the rhythm of grace, of alignment, of divine timing that is never early, never late, only exact in ways the mind cannot measure. And you will see not through proof but through presence, that your prayer was never lost. It became part of the melody that is still being composed, and when the note finally returns to you, it will be in harmony with who you become, in tune with everything you waited for, and